Hi, I'm Dr. Payal Kohli, Section Editor for Cardiology for DocWire, and I'm here today to talk to you about the retractions from the New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet on hydroxychloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine has really been the poster child for what happens when we take too many scientific shortcuts. It also shows us what happens when the scientific process is laid out in the mainstream audience for consumption and the ups and the downs that are experienced by the mainstream audience when you're seeing the scientific process in action. Now think about what the circumstances were. There was a novel virus that there was no treatment for, that was rapidly spreading around the planet and devastating lives all over the world. So there was a tremendous amount of pressure on the scientific community to produce results. There was a tremendous amount of pressure on the scientific community to come up with a treatment that worked. And unfortunately, the scientific community cracked under this pressure. And what we saw were the faults of the peer review process. So let's talk a little bit about the story of hydroxychloroquine. We started with a number of small, unblinded observational studies in March of 2020 that showed a lot of promise. Based on these studies, which were small and unblinded, President Trump started endorsing hydroxychloroquine, not just as a treatment, but potentially as a preventive therapy. Now remember, this was not based on the science that was published, but more based on the political pressure to find a treatment for the novel coronavirus. As more and more studies emerged that not only called into question the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine, but also its safety, the audience started to ignore these studies and ignore the scientific process, again, because of the political pressure. And finally, the hydroxychloroquine story culminates with the FDA revoking emergency use authorization of this medication on June 15th, 2020. So let's talk about the retractions. The New England Journal of Medicine and the Lancet, which are two of the top medical journals, actually had to retract studies about hydroxychloroquine because they were questioning the validity of the source data. Now, what this tells us is that our confidence in the peer review process certainly comes into question because we start to wonder, how is it that these top two journals allowed data that maybe wasn't valid to be published? It starts to ask questions like, whose responsibility is it to verify the validity of the data? Is it the responsibility of the authors of the study? Is it the responsibility of the journal that publishes the study? Or is it the responsibility of the people who generate the data, in this case, Surgisphere? So for me, it makes me wonder, if this happened to hydroxychloroquine, what might have been happening for the last several years to many of the other medications? Were their source data verified? Were the scientific process airtight when it came to many of the other studies that we've based our clinical practice on? So this retraction, I think, has really sent shockwaves in the scientific community, and it really begs the question of how we can stop this kind of a process in the future. And in my opinion, the responsibility for the data comes at every step of the way. So it's not just the person generating the data, which was Surgisphere in this case, but it's also the primary authors of the study who are then interpreting the data for the scientific community, and then additionally the journals or the medical resources that are publishing the data for consumption. All of those hold responsibility in verifying that the data is accurate and that the peer review process is intact. So even though hydroxychloroquine appears to have been a failure when it comes to treating or preventing COVID, it has seemingly taught us a lot about the peer review process, about the scientific community, and really exposed our errors in this entire process so that we can correct them and learn from our mistakes. Thank you for your time.